These are the headlines we're following at this hour. North Korea fires another round of ballistic missiles in its latest provocation against Seoul and Washington's extended deterrence and leading up to the North's Victory Day. South Korea's economy grew slightly in the second quarter at 0.6%, largely with exports dropping relatively less than imports, while consumer spending returns to contraction. BTS Jungkook makes history with his solo single 7, topping the Billboard Hot 100, making him only the second South Korean solo artist to do so, following Jimin, also from BTS. Good afternoon. North Korea has been ramping up tensions on the Korean peninsula lately with a series of missile launches, and it fired yet another round of missiles overnight in its latest provocation against Seoul and Washington's extended deterrence. The launches also come ahead of the anniversary of the Korean War Armistice, known as the Victory Day by the regime. Our Lee Dae-yeon has more.
North Korea late on Monday fired 2 ballistic missiles into the sea off the east coast. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected 2 ballistic missiles fired from areas near Pyongyang at 11:55 p.m. on July 24th and at midnight on the 25th. Both missiles flew around 400 kilometers before falling into the sea. This comes after a U.S. nuclear power submarine, the USS Annapolis, arrived at a naval base on South Korea's southern island of Jeju.
This shows the North's intention to respond militarily to Seoul's strategic assets. It could also be interpreted as Pyongyang's willingness to lead the tensions on the Korean peninsula.
The USS Annapolis is not classified as a strategic asset, as it's not nuclear-armed and is equipped with conventional weapons, but it's one of the main U.S. nuclear power submarines in terms of scale. Some pundits also say that the launch is to strengthen solidarity for the upcoming Victory Day in North Korea, which celebrates the 70 years of armistice in the Korean War. Earlier on Wednesday, Pyongyang fired 2 ballistic missiles into the East Sea, and multiple cruise missiles were launched on Saturday as well. South Korea's military said that the consecutive missile launches are a provocation that harms the peace and safety of not only the Korean peninsula but also the international community, urging Pyongyang to stop firing missiles as it's a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. It also said that Seoul and Washington will closely watch and prepare for any additional provocations by the North. The United States Indo-Pacific Command also said the North's recent missile launch has caused instability in the Korean peninsula, reaffirming that it will defend the South from any threat. The U.S. official also said it will continue closely communicating with its allies on the situation. A spokesperson for the U.S. Department of State, Matthew Miller, also condemned the North's missile launch while saying that Washington will focus on the diplomatic relationship with Pyongyang and said that talk without preconditions is still open for North Korea. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, as part of its commemorations for the upcoming Victory Day, North Korea has invited a Chinese delegation, which will mark the regime's first official foreign guest since the outbreak of COVID-19. Speculation rises over whether this could see the regime gearing up to open up its border. After 3 years and 6 months, North Korea is set to receive its first foreign delegation. It is inviting a Chinese delegation to mark the 70th anniversary of the armistice of the Korean War on Thursday, known as Victory Day by the regime. According to the North Korean Central News Agency on Monday, the invited Chinese delegation is led by Lee Hong-sung, a member of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. Lee's rank is lower than that of Lee Chan-shu, then Chinese top legislator who visited the regime in 2018 for the 70th anniversary of the foundation of the communist state. But his visit will mark the very first official visit by foreign guests in a shift in policy. Since the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020, North Korea has closed its borders, only partially resuming cargo transportation with China last year. The only known case of foreign guests visiting the regime was back in March when China's new ambassador to North Korea, Hwang took up the post. North Korea has also been taking part in international events with ambassador-level representatives already overseas. This includes the ASEAN Regional Forum for the past 3 years, with this year's forum also attended by its ambassador to Indonesia, Ang Kwang-il, instead of its foreign minister, Choi Sun-hee. Observers largely see the North's first post-pandemic foreign guests coming from China as an apparent show of their ties against South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. But eyes are on whether the two could resume other exchanges, perhaps in flights and trains, or keep it at high-level diplomacy for the time being. As Tokyo gears up to initiate its plan to release wastewater from its destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant, officials from South Korea and Japan began working-level talks on the issue on Tuesday morning. The head of the South Korean Foreign Minister's Bureau for Climate Change and Energy, Yoon Soo, and the Director General of the Japanese Foreign Ministry's Disarmament, Non-Proliferation and Sciences Department, Atsushi Kaifu, are currently meeting in Tokyo. On the agenda is likely the discussion on whether South Korean experts can be part of the wastewater monitoring team, with approval needed from Japanese authorities. South Korean President Yoon Sung-yeol made the request to Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida during their summit earlier this month. President Yoon Sung-yeol will meet this afternoon with the Prime Minister of Luxembourg and the Governor General of New Zealand. According to the top office, the president will hold one-on-one meetings at the Yongsan Presidential Office with Luxembourg's PM Xavier Bettel and New Zealand Governor General Cindy Kiro, who are in South Korea to represent their countries which participate in the Korean War as part of the UN forces. Officials from some 22 countries were invited to Seoul to attend a ceremony this week, marking the 70th anniversary of the armistice agreement that stopped active fighting, which coincides with UN Forces Participation Day on Thursday. The recent death of an elementary school teacher in an apparent suicide has shocked many in the country, raising the issue of how to protect teachers' authority while ensuring the rights of students. And measures to protect that authority will soon be underway under the president's directive. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
President Yoon Sung-yeol has called for measures to protect the nation's teachers and their rights in the classroom as he met with his top secretaries on Monday. This comes as a public elementary school teacher appeared to have taken her own life in her classroom last week after reportedly being under huge stress from her students' parents. The top office says by next month there will be clear guidelines set by the Education Ministry that meets the current education laws and stance of the presidential office in terms of teacher authority when it comes to guiding students.
The president instructed the Ministry of Education to promptly prepare specific guidelines to reflect the revisions of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and its enforcement decree.
Strengthening teachers' rights has been a core task for the Yoon administration since its beginning. Last year, the public education law was amended to allow teachers to educate students on behavior, while in June, a decree was revised to give teachers the right to comment on students' character.
Since its inauguration, the Yoon administration has consistently pursued a policy of strengthening teaching authority. It's based on the policy's philosophy that establishing conditions justifies the education being given and, in turn, benefits the students.
President Yoon also ordered a revision to unreasonable educational ordinances that allow a teacher's authority to be violated. This is an apparent reference to the Student Human Rights Ordinance introduced in 2010, banning certain disciplinary measures and removing constraints on personal items carried into schools and the use of mobile phones. It's currently adopted by 7 regional education offices, including Seoul's, but has been criticized by some educational experts for taking away teachers' rights in their classroom. However, it has remained controversial as it was pushed by left-leaning educational experts and politicians. On the other hand, some of the teachers were quoted in local reports as saying that while the ordinance could allow certain violations to happen, it is not the fundamental problem to the situation at the moment, and a more deep discussions are needed. In the meantime, the teacher who appeared to have taken her own life was a 23-year-old woman in charge of first graders at Seoul's Hoi Elementary School in southern Seoul. Ever since her death, teachers across the nation have shown their anger towards the current system while calling for change. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's economy grew slightly in the second quarter at 0.6%, largely with exports dropping relatively less than imports, while consumer spending returns to contraction. Our Lee Soo-jin explains.
South Korea's economy has grown for the second consecutive quarter. Data from the Bank of Korea released on Tuesday shows that the country's gross domestic product adjusted for inflation rose 0.6% on quarter during the April to June period of this year. The nation narrowly avoided falling into recession, typically defined as 2 consecutive quarters of economic contraction, in the first quarter by achieving a growth rate of 0.3%. This is the second straight quarter that the country has seen economic growth. The central bank attributed the on-quarter growth to the rise in net exports. Net exports rose in the second quarter as total imports fell more sharply compared to total exports. Imports dropped 4.2% compared to exports falling 1.8%.
The growth was led by the increase in net exports from the larger decline in imports. Imports fell sharply, mostly due to decreased imports of natural gas and oil.
Private consumption, however, fell 0.1% compared to the previous quarter, mainly due to the decrease in spending on food and accommodation. Government expenditure dropped nearly 2% on the back of decreased spending on Social Security benefits. Investment in construction and facilities also each tumbled 0.3% and 0.2% amid the sluggish demand for transportation equipment.
In-person activities fell partly due to poor weather conditions, but these are temporary factors.
Meanwhile, South Korea's gross national income, the total amount of money earned by people and businesses, remained unchanged from the previous quarter, despite the rise in real GDP as trade conditions remain sluggish. The Bank of Korea said that if the nation's economy grows 0.7% on quarter during both the third and fourth quarters, it will be able to meet this year's economic growth outlook of 1.4%. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
BTS Jungkook makes history with a solo single 7 topping the Billboard Hot 100. This makes him only the second South Korean solo artist to do so, following Jimin, also from BTS. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Less than 2 weeks since the release of his first official solo single, BTS's Jungkook saw himself and his song 7 at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart on Monday. According to the Billboard chart released Monday, 7 has sold 153,000 song downloads and CD singles combined, while drawing 21.9 million streams and 6.4 million radio airplay audience impressions. The Billboard Hot 100 chart adds the most popular songs of the week in the US across all genres, including streaming, radio airplay, and sales data. Interestingly, yet not surprisingly, Jungkook becomes just the second South Korean solo artist since his fellow group member Jimin topped the chart in April with his single Like Crazy. As a group, BTS and their songs Dynamite, a remix of Savage Love, Life Goes On, Butter, Permission to Dance, and My Universe all topped the Billboard Hot 100 charts, making the K-pop stars a regular at the top of the list. Jungkook is also the 6th member of the 7-piece group to have debuted as a solo artist. 7 is a pop song featuring American female rapper Latto and entered the British official singles chart at number 3. After its official release on July 14th, it also debuted at number 1 on the iTunes charts in 106 countries, as well as Spotify's Daily Top Song Global Chart. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now to the World Swimming Championships that are taking place in Fukuoka, Japan. South Korea's Hwang Sun-woo and Ho-joon have made it to the men's 200-meter freestyle final. Hwang, last year's silver medalist, finished 3rd, while Lee finished 6th out of 16 athletes in Monday's semifinals. Only the top 8 can advance to the finals. This is the first time that 2 Korean swimmers will be going head-to-head at an individual World Championship final. The race will start on Tuesday at 8:02 p.m. Korea time. Mass demonstrations spread across Israel after the government passed a controversial law restricting the power of the country's judiciary system. The Israeli government says a series of planned reforms will strengthen democracy in the country. Yoon reports.
The Israeli government on Monday passed a controversial bill that's triggered some of the biggest protests in the country's history. By the evening of the same day, protests against the bill had spread nationwide as thousands of people blocked roads and clashed with police in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and other parts of the country. The so-called reasonableness bill prevents Israel's Supreme Court from overruling government decisions that it considers senseless. It was approved by 64 votes to 0 after the opposition boycotted the final vote. The passing of this law is the first of a broader set of judicial reforms which the government has set out to correct what it describes as a power imbalance. Demonstrations on the streets of Israel have been taking place weekly since the start of the year in an effort to protect what protesters say is an attack on democracy. And at the end of last week, leading up to the parliamentary voting, tens of thousands of protesters marched some 70 kilometers from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and set up camp in a park between the Knesset, which is Israel's parliament, and the Supreme Court. On Monday morning, protesters blocking a boulevard outside the Knesset were sprayed by a water cannon and pulled off the road by police against the backdrop of drums, whistles, and air horns. Injuries and arrests have been reported. Meanwhile, the government says the series of planned reforms serve to strengthen democracy in the country and that the reasonableness bill was necessary because the Supreme Court had acquired too much power over politics in recent decades. The controversial reforms have polarized Israel, triggering one of the most serious domestic crises in the country's history. Former heads of Israel's security services, chief justices, and prominent legal and business figures have also been vocal against the government's reforms. Yoon, Arirang News.
Now, how about adding some meaning to your coffee? There are some cafes in South Korea where people with development disabilities serve coffee as baristas, and those cafes are set to expand nationwide. Our Jung-Woo has a story.
Junho Jang, a 22-year-old with a developmental disability, is a barista at the Namdong Post Office Cafe in Incheon. The cafe brand he works for was created by the Korea Disabled People's Development Institute. The first branch opened in 2016 in Sejong, and the number has since increased to 88 over the past 7 years. The cafes are opened in surplus spaces at public institutions and private companies, which are provided free of charge, and more than 70% of employees have some type of developmental disorder. This program is different from other welfare projects for the disabled as it actively pursues sustainable profit-making. Market analysis is conducted before opening the cafe, and the staff is educated in the management of coffee beans. Thanks to this program, about 250 people with a developmental disability have become independent with stable employment.
We plan to continue improving sales through market analysis and customer satisfaction surveys.
Korea Post joined the project at the end of last year and provided space in 4 locations, including Incheon and Daegu. Thanks to this, the cafe brand was able to prepare for further expansion nationwide.
I think the most positive part of creating jobs for people with disabilities is using our infrastructure.
The employment rate for people over the age of 15 with a developmental disability is only 20%. This is lower than the rate for all persons with disabilities, which is 35%. The ultimate goal of the cafe is to provide quality jobs for people with developmental disorders and help them develop the social skills to become independent.
I've been able to get along with new people, and it is satisfying because I've been doing long-term work, so it's rewarding.
People with developmental disabilities are able to bolster their pride as professional baristas working in the cafes. Jung-Woo, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. At least 17 bodies have been recovered after a boat believed to be carrying migrants and refugees capsized off the coast of the capital Dhaka on Monday. Authorities say 2 people were rescued, but witnesses say more were on board, although the number of people missing is not known. Officials say the victims were likely migrants attempting to reach Spain's Canary Islands. According to aid group Walking Borders, almost 800 people have died or gone missing on the route in the first half of 2023. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin signed legislation on Monday that officially outlaws gender changes in the country. The new law bans gender reassignment surgery and hormone therapy. It also bans changing a person's gender in official documents and annuls marriages where one person has changed gender. Adoptions by such couples are also prohibited. The new legislation is part of a broad crackdown on the local LGBTQ community meant to protect the country's traditional values. It comes half a year after Russia passed a law banning depictions of gay lifestyles, which the government called gay propaganda. And finally, Team Germany got off to a flying start in the 2023 Women's World Cup on Monday with a dominating 6-0 win against tournament debutants Morocco. German captain Alexandra Popp scored twice with 2 headers in the first half in Melbourne. Clara Bühl got Germany's third goal just after halftime. Morocco's problems worsened with 2 own goals before Lea Schüller added a 6th for Germany. On the same day, the opening match from Group G saw Italy win 1-0 against Argentina, while Group F's opener saw Brazil beat Panama 4-0. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Heavy monsoon rain dropped 30 to 50 millimeters an hour of downpours in Jeollabuk-do province through this morning. Rain has been expanded to more southern regions this morning and should taper off from late this afternoon. The capital and west of Gangwon-do province could see rain lingering into early Wednesday with 10 to 60 millimeters of showers expected. A heavy rain advisory is issued for parts of Jeollabuk-do province, while a heat advisory remains in place in parts of Gangwon-do and Jeju. Monsoon rain is keeping searing heat at bay, though many parts are experiencing tropical nights with overnight temperatures exceeding 25 degrees Celsius. Afternoon highs are similar to slightly higher than Monday. Seoul, Chuncheon, and Gwangju to see a high of 30 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Well, this year's rainy season could get longer due to the after effect of the 5th typhoon of the season, Doksuri, that's forecasted to dissipate in Southeast China this weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And as we speak, South Korea's first match of the 2023 Women's FIFA World Cup is underway. And among the Korean squad is Casey Eugene Fair, who is certainly grabbing a lot of attention. Born to an American father and a South Korean mother, Fair is the first Korean of mixed heritage to represent South Korea at a World Cup. And Fair, who just turned 16, is the youngest player in the history of Team Korea. The striker says her strengths are speed, physical power, and one-on-ones. FIFA has named her as one of the teenagers to wow the world, and she has already made history. This is where we end today's newscast. Thanks for watching.